Hello, and welcome to the final session in our Change Leadership Masterclass series. In this first session, Yvonne defined change leadership, why it is important, and the specific competencies important to champion. What was most impactful for me was the discussion about how work is changing and utilizing change leadership skills such as emotional intelligence, collaboration, and the ability to lead with flexibility and empowering others as a competitive edge. During the next session, we hosted a panel discussion that we brought in our experts. Andrew, Stephen, Tracy, and Yvonne talked about how change leadership relates to their roles across industries. What was particularly interesting about that discussion, and hey, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat as well. But for me, I found it interesting to hear how Tracy and Stephen, even though they were in completely different roles and different industries, and Andrew, really use change leadership competencies to excel in their roles. It really drove home for me that change leadership skills are applicable across roles and industries. Now, 2 weeks ago, Yvonne took us through a case study during our third session to demonstrate how to apply change leadership competencies to specific situation. In that session, we learned more about empathy, specifically emotional empathy versus cognitive empathy, and how to apply it. We also learned how to use the head, heart, and hands model for transformative learning to prepare, communicate, and lead change. For me, it brought a new lens of how to relate to others with compassion and active listening. Today, Yvonne will take us first through a presentation to connect back to that first session and really bring it all together. We will talk about 3 specific key change leadership skills that will guide our discussion. These change leadership skills include leadership influence, emotional intelligence and empathy, and stakeholder experience and engagement. If you missed any of these sessions, a link is posted in the chat where you can find the replay to all of the previous sessions. Today is meant to be for you, an interactive discussion between our experts and you. So please add any questions to the chat at any time and join us. Turn on your cameras and participate in the discussion. We're so happy that you're here. So before we get started, Yvonne, Andrew, Stephen, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, let Stephen and Andrew go first, and that way I can introduce myself and get started on mine directly. So, hey, go ahead, Andrew.
All right. So Andrew Kitchener here. Like Jen mentioned, I was in one of the earlier master classes, and I'm an employee surveying strategist and researcher, and I run the company New Wave Solutions. And just real quick, a couple things are we actually read free responses by hand. So that's kind of one of our unique approaches, as well as focusing on commitment instead of engagement. So I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation. It's relevant not just to my clients, but the work that I do personally. So I'm looking forward to it and hoping to hear everybody else's opinions, questions, and yeah, take it away, Stephen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen J. I am located in Denver, Colorado. I am a product manager with a background in data science, and therefore a lot of my background comes from the field of tech, working with software engineers, the types of people who you really actually do, well, actually you need to keep everyone happy, but software engineers tend to be pretty picky about their work and pretty picky about other things. I'm also the founder and host of a podcast called Actions Antidotes, where I tell stories about people who have pursued their true passions in life. And just recently, since the last time I joined this panel, I've also recently started business coaching.
Congratulations on the new journey.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Andrew and Stephen, for joining us in previous sessions. And thank you, Jen, for such a great startup and summary of all of the 3 sessions we've had. I cannot believe that we are at the 4th session in the series. You know, we started talking about this last year in doing it, and here we are doing it, you know, so kudos, Jen. Kudos.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Kudos, we kind of made it happen. So a little bit about me, everybody. My name is Yvonne Ruke Akpoveta. I am based in Toronto, Canada. I am a change management strategist, been doing that for the past 20 odd years. If I tell you exactly how many, I might age myself a little bit too much, so we'll stick to the 20 figure. And I am also a change leadership advocate, you know, rarely would you hear change leadership advocate, but I am extremely passionate about change leadership in terms of the impact it has on organizations. When change is done right, you know, most easily we think about the positive impact to the organization and their ROI. So great. But when change is done right, it has such positive impact on employee mental well-being. It has positive impact on the community at large, because, you know, when each part thrives, we all thrive together. We only have to look at cities or countries or where change hasn't been done right, and we see the negative impacts around. So that is really my big passion. Could we ask everybody to please mute? You know, so if you're not speaking, please mute. And so that's my big impact. And I'm the founder of the Change Leadership. The Change Leadership is a community of professionals who are passionate about leading and driving change. And we have events, conferences, online courses, and we hold book discussions every other quarter around change. So really glad to be here. I'm going to kick it off with a presentation, like Jen mentioned, to tie everything in, just share 3 slides. Again, this is interactive. Glad to see a few of us have our cameras on. So please put on your cameras, you know, post questions, you know, also, you know, ask your questions live. So let me just share my screen to get started. Yeah. Okie dokie, we're good. You see my screen? Okay, yes. I see some nods. Okay, hopefully you're seeing the right screen. Okay, so what we have there is, it says shift number 1. So when we had the very first session, we talked about different shifts that were taking place and why we're even having this conversation around change leadership. So what? You know, why is change leadership important? If you go back years, you know, they would say leadership was a skill only for maybe a select few. If you ask people who are change leaders, they see it as a title for someone, or they see a change leader as the head in an organization. As a change leadership advocate, and what we do is say that change leadership is for everybody. We've seen it happen in today's accelerated future of work, that in order for us to position ourselves effectively in our careers, it's important that we are all change leaders, regardless of our role, regardless of our title. We're able to lead and respond to change within our sphere of influence. That is so key. Why? Because organizations are becoming flatter, because change is happening faster than ever before, and the future of work is happening, and it's no longer being about being technical. In the past, and even now, you can hire people for their technical skills, but when everybody has their technical skill, what helps people stand out in organizations, position themselves in organizations, is their ability to lead and be able to respond to change. It's their ability to be able to move their organization forward. It's their ability to be able to say, hey, the pandemic just hit us, and this is how we can do work more efficiently. That's how you stand out in your role. You know, so it not only helps us in our role, it helps our organizations, of course. And it just, you know, to me, I take personal satisfaction in doing change. So when we talk about the one of these big shifts that is happening, accelerated future of work, just for the benefit of everybody. I like to simplify future of work because it's a term that is thrown around continuously. Everybody's talking about future of work. But simply put, prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about the future of work, the future of work. That was why it was called the future of work. But now we are living in the new world of work. The pandemic accelerated the future of work. Prior to the pandemic, we were talking about how, remote working was going to become a thing, how automation was going to be the way, how AI was coming to take our jobs. We're talking about different things and how the future was changing. But now we are living it. Simply put, the future of work is how we do our work, the tools we work with. We can all agree that how we do our work and the tools we work with is changing. We're doing it remotely. We're using Microsoft Teams has become a thing. Zoom has become a thing. Organizations are looking at hybrid workplaces. I posted on my LinkedIn a poll the other day whereby the CEO of Goldman Sachs said he demanded that everybody come into work, resume in the office, and only half of the people turned up to the office, because it's not about pushing back on the change like some people have tried to do in the past, but it's about responding to the change. So he needs to realize, unlike every other organization, that hybrid working is here to stay. Remote working is here to stay. And the earlier organizations start thinking how we respond to this accelerated future of work and this new world of work, because I'm going to start shifting now to talking about the new world of work as opposed to the future of work, because we're living it now. So it's the tools we work with, where we work, and how jobs are changing. And all of this is being driven by advanced technologies such as AI, robotics, and ongoing disruption, and now the pandemic. So the future of work is here to stay. One of the skills that become important are change leadership skills. And why do I say that? When we look at the World Economic Forum, and they looked at what are some of the top skills that are going to be important by 2025 from 2020. We're here in 2022, right? We are in 2022. I nearly got that wrong. And we're midway through it. They highlight some skills here. And what I've done is just put like a square box around some of them that tie very strongly into what we would categorize as some of the change leadership skills and competencies. All of these skills are very important, and all of these skills, one way or the other, you could slice and dice it, and you would call it change. You could call it change leadership or leadership skills, one way or the other. But when I look at this top 5, like we talk about critical thinking and analysis, one of the things I like to call in the course I deliver, decision making. This is a key skill when it comes to being a change leader, because you have to be responsive, you have to be fast, you have to be proactive. Another one is leadership and social influence, which is influence. I love how John Maxwell says, influence is leadership, leadership is influence. They're one and the same thing. And again, just like change leadership, leadership is not about title, it's not about position. This is something that we all are. Organizations are shifting to say, we're not just only training our managers to be leaders, but we're training our teams to be able to lead, drive, and manage change. Another one is emotional intelligence, and I tie that into empathy. Empathy and emotional intelligence are different. I teach on that separately, but I'm going to tie them in together. Some people put empathy on their emotional intelligence. EQ, another big skill, because one of the things that you will see about all of these skills, whether emotional intelligence, troubleshooting, and user experience, persuasion, negotiation, when you wrap all of them together, what do they have in common? Not only, like I said, they represent, some change leadership skills. They also represent skills that are difficult to automate. That is why they're becoming more and more relevant, because as we bring in more automation into the world, and we're able to get bots to do things, we're able to get robots to do things, we're able to use AI to automate. When we do all of those things, there are certain things for now. I say for now, because if anybody could ever say some of the things that we see technology doing now was possible, we would have said no. But for now, these are the things that are going to be difficult to automate or going to be difficult for AI to take over, or robotics or automation or technology. So that's why they're becoming more and more valuable in our roles. And that's why I said earlier, you can have technical skills, but when it comes to your soft, in quote, power skills, when it comes to those power skills, those are the things that are going to be difficult to automate. And those are the things that are going to be able to help us stand out in terms of leading, driving change. Another chart I want to share with you. So this is from McKinsey Global Institute. So skills, again, for the future of work. A few of them that I want to call out. It shows, some of the hours spent, on skills, and where it is that we're going and what's becoming more important. We see what's going down, a lot of technical skills, basic data inputs, basic literacy. But what are those skills that are going up? Creativity, complex information processing and interpretation, leadership, and being able to manage others, all grouped into being highly cognitive, social, and emotional. And of course, technical skills, you see them there, but really advanced technical skills there. Those are the people who are going to be able to, code the AI, do the robotics, and make those things work, mostly in demand. But next to that, supporting that, what are those skills? Those are the social skills, the emotional skills, the cognitive skills. And we're going to be talking about that. One last slide that I want to share with you. They reached out to chief learning officers. This was a Financial Times research when they reached out to chief learning officers and they asked them to say, what are your top priorities as we emerge in the pandemic for your organizations? And out of them, what were the three things, the top three? Leadership, change management, diversity and inclusion. So even if we just focus on the top two, change management and leadership, are things that organizations are focused on. They see the value in terms of what it brings to their organization and how they want to equip their teams, which is what brings us to today's session, which is all about how are we developing our change leadership competencies and what it is that we want to discuss today. So I have my panel with me, who I would direct questions to, but these questions are also directed to everybody in the audience. I want to hear from you guys. I want you guys to help answer this question. If you have thoughts on it, please share your thoughts on it. And if you have questions from any of our sessions or even today's sessions, so throw it in. So when I look at all of the various skills, and in the very first session we had, the replays are available for all of the sessions. When we look at those, I mentioned 10 change leadership competencies that I personally teach on, but there are a lot more out there. But just to summarize some of what we've gone through in the last couple of weeks or last few weeks, and even with what we've just done in the presentation, we're going to discuss, like Jen mentioned, leadership, which is influence. We're going to discuss emotional intelligence and empathy, stakeholder experience and engagement. So I'm going to kick that off with leadership and influence. And I want to throw it out to you, the audience, throw it out to you, starting with you, Andrew and Stephen, and say, what does leadership and influence really mean to you in true practice? Because we hear a lot about leadership, we hear a lot about influence, but how would you define it? What does it mean to you, and how can we really put it into practice?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Stephen, I'll just kind of jump in. But one of the things that I think about is it's about really clarity as far as how to move forward and inspiring people as to why they should move forward. Mm-hmm. And I think that inspiration in a manner that allows you to unify people around a collective understanding, collective mission, collective set of values, and a collective purpose is really kind of the core of leadership. Because yes, you do have to deal with individuals, and that's especially relevant for emotional intelligence, but getting a collective, motivated, committed workforce that's understanding the reasons and the motivators for change, and then also what's on the other side of that change, what can be achieved if that change is made. I think that's really what it means to me.
So Andrew, I'll ask you a question on that one. So let's say for somebody who doesn't have title or authority and looking at what you have as your definition, they're in their role as a manager or as a change manager or as a SME. They don't have a team. How can they still be a leader?
Yeah. So you're a leader, not just in a hierarchical sense. You're a leader in terms of you're a leader in terms of your influence on the people around you, regardless of that hierarchy, in my opinion. And while you might not be the key decision maker, so to speak, that doesn't mean that your interactions, what you're pushing for, what you believe, what you say, doesn't have an effect on the people around you. And most people who have worked in any size organization know that leadership isn't created by being given a title. It's something that's developed, worked on, and really implemented over time and improved. It's not just, okay, you have the title now of vice president, you're now a leader. You should be a leader if you're a vice president, but that doesn't necessarily mean you are.
Yeah, and in today's world, organizations want to see leaders and promote leaders as opposed to see people and say, oh, we'll train them to be a leader. They want to see those leadership qualities stand out before they put you into that position. Stephen, I want to take this to you because even some of the discussions we've had in the past, even as a product manager, how would you put leadership and influence into practical play? How does that happen for you in the practical real life world?
Yeah, well, actually, it's interesting. I think about that because I think about that as part of the reason why we've seen a recent explosion in the job title product manager, the interest in people to become product managers, the interest in organizations to have product managers. And it reminds me of this then versus now, if we're going to quit using the term the future of work idea, because everything I've read is that then the old work culture was very much about what a lot of people refer to as carrots and sticks, which is your standard way of leading people, say, oh, if you do well, we're going to give you this reward. If you do poorly, we're going to give you this punishment, which, to me very much reminds me a lot of school, when you're growing up. But one of the things that product management brings in, it brings in this idea of kind of activating people's intrinsic motivation. So people, one of the things that I like to say, and I've been saying even before I transitioned to product management, was that like when you're in an organization, like we're all adults. This isn't eighth graders you're trying to wrangle around against their will to come to some class they don't want to be in. Everyone should have at least some sort of motivation for being where they are, even if for some people, I guess there still is. It's still all about the money, but that's still somewhat of a motivator that you have to work with. And so one of the ways that I like to approach it is to find this balance of leaning into people's motivation, but while also understanding that there is a balance. And what I mean by that is that some people that really kind of take a hard line to go away from the carrots and sticks approach, what they'll sometimes do, and what I've been guilty of in the past, is go too far and give people what they want and kind of avoid any uncomfortable conversation. And that business coaching teaches me, and sometimes you need to tell people, hey, this is great. I'm glad you're motivated by this, but we need to focus up here. And so there's a little bit of that kind of just saying, from my standpoint, we need to go a little bit in this direction, but I still love your energy and I love your enthusiasm here.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I love how you use intrinsic motivation as really key. And that's something that is big when it comes to leading and managing change, because often at times you might find that if you're a change manager, for instance, or have the responsibility for leading change, you may not have that title where you can people feel they're dependent on you. People sometimes change is even a project. So people have their day-to-day responsibilities, and then they have that project which they have to work on, and then they have to adapt to this change. And that's where influence and leadership comes in, because you have to be able to get people to have that, appeal to their intrinsic motivation, appeal to their buy-in to the change, influence them to want to come on board with the change. I've been part of very big enterprises, worked with two of the biggest banks here in Canada. And there was a time that they would have like a project and they'll say, oh, it's a regulatory project, so everybody has to change. Now, when you go to each department and say, we have another regulatory project, we have this change that is just as important, everybody's change was becoming important. So you could no longer use, like you mentioned, Stephen, the carrot and stick approach, because they would show you their own, what was more important, that they had priority. And that's where influence comes in, whereby you're able to really get their buy-in. If anybody wants to contribute to any of the topics we're talking about, by all means, please just raise your hand, use the reaction button to raise your hand, and we can bring you into the conversation. Jen, I want to hear your perspective on this one. When it comes to really leading and driving change, what role does leadership and influence play?
Well, Yvonne, I think you made a really good distinction here, is you don't have to have the title to be a leader in your organization. And that's a lot of what we've talked about here. And for me, in my experience, it is those softer skills. It's building those relationships. It's, connecting one-on-one and really talking to people. When I led a large scale change at an organization, it was a global organization, and we implemented a new compensation structure. And probably where I found the most success was those one-on-one meetings. When I sit down and I said, it sounds like you have some questions, you have some resistance to this process. And in particular, one of the tensions that we felt in implementing this was around titles, because titles are important and people work hard to get those titles. So when I started to have those kind of the challenges and questions, I sit down with operation managers and I say, okay, so you tell me, how can we do this together? What works for you? And really getting into that co-creation process that I think is so important, so that people feel empowered. And you talk about that. So really, that's where it's at for me. I think that anyone can be a leader, but it's really using empathy, compassion, and communication skills.
Yeah, and all those things we're going to jump into. But I love what you said, Jen, and you brought it home really practical, as in how can you influence people? And that's in the one-on-one conversations. That's in the trust you build, because people are going to say, do I trust this person? And what you also said to us, and I hope people caught that, was that it wasn't about using a one-size approach that fits all. It was about understanding your stakeholders. That is how you build influence when it comes to leading change, to say, who are my stakeholders? What is it that my stakeholders want? How can I, and when they see that you are, first of all, taking time to understand them, guess what? They buy into you as a leader, because before they think, oh, yes, I'm going to follow you, they're going to think, can I trust this person? Where is this person taking me? Sometimes there's a carrot and stick approach, but when we're change leaders, regardless of our role and title, what's the best way to bring people on board is to buy into their trust. And that's where we can influence them to get their buy-in. So I love that practical approach you used, which was one-on-one, just, going out there, talking to them, understanding what they need. And we will come back to that one. I see a question from Doher. So we're going to do a break in transmission to answer your question, and anybody can chip in. But it says, what would you tell someone who is just starting out in the field of OD and change? How to show up with confidence and how to build that confidence? Okay, so I'm going to tie that in a little bit to say maybe how you build that confidence as a leader and influence. So my easiest thing, and I'll tell you this, is I've been doing this thing for 20 years. I still start a new project and I feel like, oh my gosh, am I doing the right thing? What am I going to do? How do I go about it? So whether you're 20 years in, you're 1 year in, or you're 1 month in, there's always going to be that thing where you think, have I got this? If you go in confident as somebody who is leading change, if you go in confident, if you go in feeling you have the answers, that is your first mistake. I'll tell you why. Because like Jen said earlier, when it comes to leading and driving change, whether organizational development, change management, all of those things, the answer is in the change. Every organization is unique. So what we need to do is to take the time to understand that change, is to ask questions. So Doha, as opposed to you going in trying to feel confident that you have the answers, go in feeling confident that you can interact with people. So focus on building your interrelationship skills, where you go in and you say, you know what, I want to learn from you, because people want to share. So build those leadership and confidence skills and relational and interpersonal skills, where you are more able to connect with people and get people to buy into you as a leader. And then when they start to talk to you and tell you about the change, that's where you find the answers, because the answers are with the people who are already in the change. And then another simple way is just know your craft. I'm not going to tell you to practice change leadership models or change management models, because you may not, you don't know what you need until you're in the change and you understand the change. So for me, what I go in as a change manager or change strategist, or as a change leader doing, is going with an open mind to learn from people, allow people to do the talking and guide you so that you can find the answers, as opposed to trying to find your confidence in knowing the answers before you start that project or start that role. Does anybody want to add to Doher's question, or anybody want to add anything on leadership and influence before we move to empathy and emotional intelligence? Doher, did that help?
Do you mind if I jump in just real quick?
Yes.
So one thing is just kind of building off exactly what you said there, is the importance of psychological safety. So even though you want feedback and you want to hear those opinions when you're making these changes, and you want to solicit those, you need to create an environment in which people feel comfortable coming to you with that information. And I think that's extremely key. And there's a difference too between showing up with confidence and building confidence. And I think that psychological safety route is what's going to allow you to build the confidence of others, which in turn will give you confidence. So it's a little bit of a, chicken or the egg concept, but I think that's a very important approach. And then just as a secondary point, in my experience, what's been extremely helpful is just to acknowledge the reality from the very beginning that, okay, change is difficult. I mean, nobody here, personal or professional lives, has made a major change and gone, that was really easy. There was no struggle there. That wasn't an uphill battle. And if you acknowledge that, it allows people to accept it and move forward from it, rather than expecting, okay, this needs to be made easy. This is going to be easy. Oh, I'm encountering another problem. You set that standard that you then can build off of. So those are kind of my 2 quick notes on it.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And I like what Alvin said in the comments, is when you do change with them as opposed to them. Because when people even see that title, change manager, or some organizations are even trying to move away from the word change manager because they find it a little bit intimidating. So when you come in there and people think, oh, you want to come and change me? They already have their backs up a little bit. So, but once you come in with the approach is that I want to work with you, let's do this together, it starts to break some of those barriers, and I know we're going many levels up for you, Doher. When I say many levels, we're going into various things, but if you just go in really focused on building relationships with people, that's the beginning for you to feel more comfortable. Lisa, please go ahead, unmute and go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm happy to be here too. Sorry I was late. I wanted to just add, I think to address some of the resistant behavior. So I'm closing my eyes to concentrate. Helping, it also dovetails into psychological safety. So approaching employees and leaders, middle managers, to say, here's your contribution and where it fits into our values or our mission or what your department's mission is. Here's your expertise. This is what I would love for you to bring into our goals. And I think when people feel recognized for what they do or how they can bring it, I think they start to lower their resistance. And so that's kind of what I'm all about, is the psychological, what's happening in the neuroanatomy for everybody about their fight or flight response. And so when people feel recognized and heard, so kind of to dovetail into what Andrew was talking about, at least acknowledging their part in it and how they can maybe even raise their game. to help with the change or what have you, or whatever the change is going to look like. So I just wanted to add that piece, and I think it's maybe a segue to your next section. So thank you.
Yes, it so is. Thanks for adding that piece, which nicely takes us to the next session, topic 1, which is empathy and emotional intelligence. Like I said, those are 2 separate things, but let's lump it together just for the sake of time. I would love to hear from the audience and love to hear from, Jen, Stephen, and Andrew, and back to you guys as well. When it comes to emotional intelligence and empathy, these are keywords that I love have come up in the last 2 years of the pandemic. People are talking more and more about it. And, somebody got a little bit irritated, I think about a year ago, and said, oh, it's just going to become another trend. Everybody's talking about it. What does it really mean? And all of that. I said, I don't care if it's a trend, as long as people are talking about it. That's the first thing. Even if it's a trend, at least we're talking about it. This is a conversation we weren't having before, but now we're having more and more about those discussions. And, in the last session we had in the masterclass, one of the things that I wanted us to differentiate was in the workplace was cognitive empathy versus emotional empathy, because we easily think emotional empathy. But for this conversation, we're talking emotional empathy. Sorry, we're talking cognitive empathy, and we're talking about emotional intelligence. So when it comes to leading change, driving change in the workplace, how can we practice emotional intelligence and I'm getting the whole, how can we practice emotional intelligence and empathy? Jen, I'll start with you.
Well, Yvonne, will you remind us again the differences between emotional and cognitive empathy before we get into the conversation, please?
Yes, it's just good. We're using so much emotion that I'm getting my whole emotional confused. So emotional empathy, often focuses on you wanting to feel what somebody else is feeling. And that can be draining. And that can even turn into bias, where you become biased, because you feel what they're feeling. What if you can't feel what somebody's feeling as a mother? What if you can't feel what somebody's feeling as a father? What if you cannot feel what somebody is feeling, whatever their situation is? So we focus on feeling when we talk about emotional empathy. We want to feel what they're feeling, and that can be really draining and can immobilize us. So the focus is on cognitive empathy, which is the ability to understand where somebody may be coming from and how they may be feeling, so that you can support them in making the right decisions. And some of the things that we spoke about when it came to cognitive empathy is that as a change leader, it helps you know how to approach the change, how to present the change to them, how to tailor your change to them, because you're coming from a place of empathy to understand how it works for them. And emotional intelligence ties into being emotionally aware, whether of your own feelings, how you respond to situations, and, also being aware of of those around you. We could go into a whole 2-hour session on those 2 topics alone, but just to give you an idea. So what are some practical ways that we can apply emotional intelligence or empathy when it comes to leading change? Over to you, Jen.
Well, Yvonne, I really liked in your session, you talked about, and I'm going to look at this, but that the head, heart, hands model for transformative learning, to start to think about the differences of how people experience change. And I think one of the first aspects is recognizing that everyone experiences change differently. And so as change leaders, how do we understand how others are experiencing it? And what I liked about this model is it really had us start to think about, okay, does this person lead with emotions? Do they feel things, or are they more analytical? And then how can I make sure that I prepare before I meet with this person to make sure I have everything that I need to connect with them? So that's one thing that I think, starting to use those emotional intelligence skills of thinking outside of, okay, as a change leader, how does this impact me only? And how do I want to come across, is really thinking about the other person that I'm interacting with and starting to understand their experience and how they're going through the changes.
So true. Thank you so much for sharing that. And sometimes this is easier said than done. So I'm going to come to you in 1 second, Lisa, but I want to ask Andrew or Stephen, do you have anything to share on that one to say, what are some of the challenges when it comes to truly practically implementing being emotionally intelligent or practicing empathy? Gosh, I just want to go and implement my change. I don't have time for all of this, So what do you see as some of the challenges and overcoming that?
Yeah, I think it's similar to when you're making a change. You want to make that change, but you don't really want to take the time to plan it beforehand. That the logistics of it can be tedious, and it can seem like just kind of a barrier to moving efficiently. When in reality, anybody who's gone through any larger significant change professionally, personally, the need for empathy and emotional intelligence, you'll see that it plays a role which allows the process to move quicker and more efficiently. And I think you made a great point that it's kind of become a buzzword, or at least there's a fear that it's become a buzzword. And I think it's important to fight back against that and do it in an objective manner. So there are multiple studies that show approximately 90% of top performers are high in emotional intelligence, and 20% of low performers are high in emotional intelligence. So there are quantifiable distinctions that matter. As far as how to work on it, how to improve it, the biggest thing that has been personally impactful, just for my own emotional intelligence and for the role that it's played in any changes that I've supported, is awareness. So there needs to be awareness and mindfulness. And that is kind of the ignition, so to speak, for emotional intelligence. And that awareness of the role of emotional intelligence, the need for it, and the fact that there are two sides, your own emotions as well as the emotions of others. And you need to be aware of both in order to manage both.
Thank you so much. I love that you come from the perspective of both, being aware on both sides. So being aware of yourself and being aware of even your stakeholders or your users or your teams that you're working with. And emotional intelligence right now is something that technology cannot do yet. I always say yet, because I remember when I forget the name of the robot that they had that lacked total emotional intelligence and actually said something really bad, at one of these conferences, robotic conferences. And the next time they brought that robot back, she had, I'm calling her she because she referred to as female, she had improved her emotional intelligence to be able to sense a few more things. So they are even beginning to program sensing things, reading people's emotions, being able to respond to people's emotions. So we don't know where all of this is going. But Lisa, I see your hands up and I want to hear from you.
Oh, thank you. I think you were going to call on Stephen next, so I'll wait.
Yeah, okay. You can go then. I'll go back to Stephen. So just go ahead.
Okay, sure. I have to lower my hand. I wanted to mention that, and it was what Andrew was talking about as well, the awareness and mindfulness. I think when leaders can learn those pieces, they don't have to do as much prep. But what they do want to bring with them is what their people's goals are, how their people want to grow, and or what their people can bring to the game. So they might have to refresh on that, right? But learning mindfulness and awareness gives the leader a presence of mind to be able to really listen, right? So it's a little bit of instruction and a little bit of practice, but it can be done. And it's something that I come from the background of psychology and trauma and trauma response and treatment, and then also resistance to defensiveness in the business world as well now. So in fact, doing conversations with regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I am bringing in how to keep our emotional regulation under control so that we can actually be in an optimal state of learning and listening to one another about our experiences with racism and or any of those issues and how to correct that or how to approach people. So it's a big topic, right?
And it's a big, and it's a big topic. And, to be able to tackle things like diversity and inclusion and tackle any type of change or start or lead or drive any change, it starts with having empathy and emotional intelligence and awareness and regulation. Exactly. And, starting, it starts, first of all, starting from understanding self.
Yes. Yes.
And then when you understand self, whether being mindful or emotionally intelligent to control my own emotions and myself, to be able to now focus on that next person from a place of empathy.
Exactly.
I may not have your experiences. Please help me understand your experiences. Right. I'm not being affected by this change. My job title is not changing. I don't have to start using the system. Let me give you simple empathy at play here, and then we'll go to Stephen. I think I shared this example last session. If I did, forgive me if I did. If you weren't there, you'd hear it again. We were sending out an email to folks, text messages. And I said to the lady, it was just like a PDF. You tap on the link on it and said, tap on the link in this PDF. I said to her, not everybody's going to be able to do this. She said, but why wouldn't everybody be able to do it? She was coming from a place where she had an iPhone. She was technology savvy. But when you apply something like empathy, you have to say, who are my stakeholders? Who are my users? Who are the people that are going to be receiving this message? Some of them may be older. They're not used to technology. They don't know that you can click on where to click on to open it. Some of them may not have iPhones. And they're not receiving it the same ways. Not everybody has a smartphone. Some people might have SMS-based messages and they're not receiving that link. So that's a simple way we apply empathy when it comes to leading change, looking at the situation from who our stakeholders are to be able to say, how can we tailor our messages? How can we tailor the change? How can we tailor the solution to benefit them? And it's awareness of self, putting my own biases or prejudice or experience in the back burner and focusing on my stakeholders. Stephen, how do you want to take this home for us when we talk about empathy and emotional intelligence?
So from a purely cognitive empathy standpoint, I think there's two phrases that we need to keep reminding ourselves. One of them comes from a book called The Four Agreements, which very much ties into the whole mindfulness idea. And that is, don't take anything personally, which is the understanding that when you say something to someone, their reaction to it is much more a reflection of them than it is of you. And that kind of helps us really respond to whatever people are going to have to say. Exactly, Yvonne, from the standpoint of, okay, we're all having a different experience with the change. The other thing that I think we need to be constantly reminding ourselves is something that's kind of almost really tempting and conditioned to us by society, which is one of the barriers which we have, which is the constant reminder that not everything or most things are not a battle between good and evil, as all of our superhero films, all of our historical interpretations of wars and stuff like that try to present it. We're not in a battle of our good versus their evil, as tempting as it is for all of us to want to understand it that way. It's all just different perspectives, and people are all kind of on a journey in that particular, in whatever particular fashion, as you're bringing up who has different technologies, who is concerned about what this could possibly mean. Oh my God, I don't have one of these iPhones. I don't know anything about text messages. And now all of a sudden my job's going to completely change and I'm not going to be able to do it anymore and I'm going to get fired, which is a real fear with a lot of this stuff.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for bringing that home. Awesome. And looking at the time, like I said, all the discussion, I could talk about change for like hours and hours. So we have 10 more minutes to go in this session. And I want to bring in stakeholder experience and engagement. And, that could cover a whole array of things, and for me, it's Jen already alluded to it earlier. We're talking co-creation, we're talking collaboration, we're talking focus on the users. How do we bring the users and the stakeholders to the center of it? Like I like to say, as change leaders, change managers, anybody responsible for leading and managing change, the first thing I always say is take off the cape. We are not the heroes in the story. The hero in the story is our stakeholder who we're taking on a journey. If check out Hero's Journey if that resonates with anybody. It's about really putting our stakeholders in the middle of it. So how can we bring our stakeholders and our users and our teams into creating an experience for them? How can we engage with them? How can we work with them? I would love to hear from folks. So if you haven't spoken, we're bringing it to the end, in 10 minutes. So this is the opportunity to really share, ask any questions, and engage in this one. So on this one, I am going to start with Andrew. Andrew, how do we put our users, our people, our team at the center of the change and focus on them to create that experience for them?
Yeah.
To be able to lead and effectively manage change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that too often companies will go in and they'll approach the experience side of things without asking, okay, what's not going well? That's the most important question. Yes, you want to know what's going well, but you want to start out from an understanding of what's not going well, what needs to be improved. So I think we have a tendency, because of our quick pivot to remote work, to say, wow, we really did that quite effectively. We're doing pretty well there. When in reality, 75% of employees say that communication and collaboration are worse due to remote work. And that's present data. That's not right after the switch happened. And then also, of those who want to return to work, 55% of them say that one of the main reasons why they want to return is for more effective communication collaboration. So I think having that starting point allows you to say, okay, generally most companies aren't doing this as well as they need to. We might be one of them. What do our employees, what do our stakeholders think? And starting there, rather than just moving forward with a predetermined plan and approach, is really important, and also connects back to the emotional intelligence side of things.
Thank you so much for sharing, Andrew. And you reminded me of a situation I had, right in the middle of all this anti-Black racism, a year or two ago. I can't believe, all this happened when DEI came back to the fore, and I had all these requests. Oh, can you come do a DEI workshop for us? Can you come do a DEI training session for us? I said, why? What are we addressing? Because from a change management or change leadership perspective, to what you just said, Andrew, was that before we try to fix anything, we have to engage or talk to our stakeholders to find out from them, what's the issue, what's broken, what are we fixing? DEI as an example, and this is not a DEI session, DEI as an example is something that we've been talking about for a long time. But it's not working because people just come and the first thing they want to do is just, hey, let's do a DEI workshop because they think they know the solution. But we need to go back to the stakeholders, the users, the team to understand what are the exact issues that exist within our organization. Then we can go from ground zero. And that's what we call change assessments. In the change management term, we do our change assessments. We understand the change before we start to think about what the solution is to that change, before we start to do the workshops and think we know the answers. So thank you, Andrew, for bringing that one up. Alvin, I see your hand up, so I'm going to come to you before I go to the others. Go ahead, Alvin.
Sorry I'm not being able to show my video. I'm actually doing some work at the same time. So
multitasking.
Yes, absolutely. But I just wanted to say absolutely yes, what you just said in regards to DEI, because one of the things that I understand is the fact that you have to understand what is going on in the practice. What are the systems, the processes, the people, the organization, the cultural elements, all these different things. And I think sometimes what we try to do is give one solution and think it's going to be an all size fits all. And that's not really the case because there's so many things that are systematic that have to be taken care of, right? And so it's a evolutionary process with anything that you're doing. And I think that is something that is really essential. And also to understand that when you're doing any change, that first of all, you have to really say, what is the current state, right? Mm-hmm. And clarify that, like let everybody know, like this is what the current state looks like. And so once we have that understanding of what the current state is, then we can build, right? But we have to be able to understand that before we can move forward in trying to address the issue from a DEI perspective. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. And when we talk about DEI, that's not sorry, talk about DEI because everybody's talking about, when we talk about user experience, that's where we're now talking about things like there's been that talk around design thinking, and design thinking talks a lot about empathy, talks about putting the user at the center of the user experience, the stakeholder experience, and all of those things. And I see Stephen nodding his head. Stephen, what do you want to add to that one? How do we create user stakeholder experience when it comes to leading and driving change?
Well, yeah. First of all, I'm nodding my head because I love the whole concept behind design thinking. And one of the important parts of design thinking is the first thing you do is define what is before looking at anything else. But one of the things that I was going to bring up is creativity, kind of coming a little bit out of left field. But our stakeholders in any organization are a diverse set of people. You have your customers, you have your shareholders, you have your employees, you have the community around you by which you serve. And I think it's important to tap into your creativity, which is that right brain muscle that a lot of people oftentimes have diminished in recent culture, to come up with win-win solutions so that we stop pitting the stakeholders against each other in these kind of familiar battles that we've been fighting for pretty much a century that have really not worked out so perfectly. So instead of saying, okay, we're battling with the management for better wages, kind of in a traditional standpoint, no, is there a way to come up with something that's a winning solution for everybody based on the double diamond approach to design thinking, where you first define what is, come up with all the ideas, narrow down the exact problem, and then come up with a whole bunch of different solutions and try them all out.
Thank you. And, one of the things I love about design thinking, I don't know design thinking that much, so let me not say one of the things I love about design thinking, but behind design thinking, some of the key concepts are user experience. It's about putting your stakeholders and your users at the center of it. So thank you so much for that, Stephen. Thank you so much for that, Alvin. Oh my gosh, 2 more minutes to go. So Jen, how do you want to quickly wrap this up in 30 seconds? What do you want to bring into stakeholder experience and engagement?
30 seconds. I could spend.
Yeah.
One thing that I just want to bring up that's been so interesting for me as I talk to people is, and it's really exciting, as far as how organizations can move forward. And when we start talking about various organizational structures that we're starting to see enter the marketplace, but really the heart of it is, we can go to employees for not only what's wrong, but we can also start to go to them for how do we solve them. And for me, it's starting this discussion about how do we bring not only leaders in the organization, but how do we bring in the people that change impacts most? How do we bring in frontline employees? How do we start having these conversations? And I'm talking really fast because I have 30 seconds, but some of the initiatives that I've heard that are starting to happen are having very large brainstorming sessions that address this. So I think that in the upcoming years, we're going to start to see more collaboration and co-creation, which really excites me. So thank you.
And thank you for rounding that up with co-creation and collaboration, because those are two big, co-creation and collaboration can mean one and the same, but that is one big change leadership competency: collaboration, the ability to be able to collaborate and get buy-in from your stakeholders will accelerate your change initiative. They are the heart of the change. And if you can just bring them on board and they feel valued and they feel part of the change, that is it, So Jen, thanks for that big round of. But you know what? This has been a great last 4 sessions. The replay is available on the events page link in Futurocracy. Thankful to Futurocracy for allowing us this room and forum to be able to share about change leadership competencies. And there is so much more happening on those forums. If you like anything you've said or anything any of the speakers have said, please go ahead and connect with us on LinkedIn. You know, I am always open to connections and connecting there. So connect with me there on LinkedIn with Jen, Stephen, Andrew, with Lisa as well, Alvin, you know, everybody that has contributed. Let's not stop the conversation here. Let's continue the conversation and continue to have it. And Jen, please bring the session to a close. Over to you. Are you on mute?
Of course. Of course.
How could we end this session without asking, are you on mute?
Right. Yeah, let's talk about a new way to work, right? So I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who has logged in week after week and joined us for the series. It's been such a wonderful learning experience for me. And I know Yvonne, I'll speak for you here for a second, but I know that she's really enjoyed it as well. So I just wanted to say thank you, give a big thank you to Stephen and Andrew. Thank you for taking your time. They're not being paid here, so they have blessed us with their time, their experience and knowledge. So a big thank you. And I just wanted to say thank you. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. And yes, absolutely, as Yvonne said, please reach out to me or anyone else. And let's keep this conversation going. So have a great day and bye.
Bye for now, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.